Before Ezekiel was a prophet who spoke life into dead bones, he was a priest in the temple. His job was to make sure that everything was in order. There was a place for everything and everything in its place. There was a place for the scrolls. There was a place for the holy oil. There was a place for the vestments. There was a court for the Gentiles and a court for the Israeli men, a court for the Israeli women, a court for the priest. There was even a place in the temple for God, in the Holy of Holies. It was in the Holy Land, in the holy city, in the holy temple, so it was really the Holy of Holies, but they just called it Holy of Holies for short. I don't know exactly what was in there. It was the Ark of the Covenant, and it was imagined that God was enthroned on this ark. I think it was a big holy box. And next to the big holy box, attached to it, was a big holy crank. And once a year, the high priest goes inside the Holy of Holies and turns that crank. Da-dun, 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 da. And out pops God and does what God is supposed to do for a civilized people. Bless people, forgive folks, confirm the status quo. Well, Ezekiel was busy one day writing his sermon, sitting at his desk, writing a sermon deep in thought when the Babylonian soldiers came in, invaded the city, picked him up, writing desk and stool and all, as he was writing, and carried him off into captivity, along with King Jehoiakim, and along with the artisans and intellectuals of the city, carried him off to Babylon, where they were in exile. He was 30 years old when he first saw a vision of a God who would not be kept in a box. He looked up, and there was this magnificent chariot, and it had these huge fiery wheels within wheels, so that it could go forward and back, it could go right and left, it could go anywhere God wanted to go. And riding on this chariot, there were four creatures. One looked like an eagle, one looked like a lion, one looked like an oxen, one looked like a human. And they were looking to the north and the south and the east and the west. And from out of this chariot came a hand, and in the hand there was a scroll, and a voice from the chariot said, "Eat this scroll." Well, it was like a scroll that he read in the temple, so he started to open it up and read it. And the voice said, "No, eat this scroll. Eat it, eat it." So he ate it, and behold, it was sweeter than honey. So what happens to a person when they no longer read the scriptures? They no longer think about the scriptures. They no longer discuss the scripture, but they eat the scripture, and it becomes a part of their life's blood and the marrow of their bones. He became a prophet. It was January 5th, 585, when somebody escaped from the city of Jerusalem with the news that everything was gone, everything was destroyed, all their hopes, all their dreams. And God took Ezekiel out to this valley that was filled with nothing but dead bones. All the dreams of the people there were some of your dreams and hopes that you'd recognize in this valley of dead bones. And God said, "Can these bones live?" Now, Ezekiel had gotten pretty wise. He knew that he couldn't say, "Yes, these bones can live," because he'd seen the bones. There was no picking up these bones and taking them to Mayo Clinic and doing extraordinary measures and bringing them back to life. There was no organ transplant possible. There was no looking at the bones and saying, "Doesn't he look natural?" These bones are dead, dead, dead. So we can't just say, "Yes, these bones can live." On the other hand, he'd seen God in this cosmic Harley-Davidson. And he'd experienced the power of God. So he couldn't say, no, these bones can't live. So wisely he said, you know, Lord, whether these bones can live. So God says, speak to these bones. And he spoke to the bones, and there was a rattling of all these bones in the valley, and they came one on top of the other, on top of the other, and then they were wrapped in sinews, and they were covered with flesh, and they looked like they were alive, but they just sat there. There was no life, there was no passion in them. So God says, speak to the winds. So Ezekiel spoke to the wind, and it came from the north and the south and the east and the west. And the wind filled those bones, those sinews, that flesh with life. And they stood up, and behold, they were a mighty host. That's what happens when God, who is in a box, da-dun, da-dun, da-da-da-da-dun, da-dun, da-dun, da-dun-da, becomes God who's in your bones. Them bones gonna rise again.